friends, welcome to another episode of Making Disciples. My name is Cris and I am your host. I hope you're doing all right. Hope you are very well. I am pretty excited to share with you today's interview. It's an interview with Samuel Jackson Reid, and you'll hear this in the podcast episode. We had never met before this interview, but I'd been on YouTube. I love listening to worship whilst I'm working, and obviously you've often got YouTube in the background just playing, and it kind of drifted into playing a video of a guy, Samuel Jackson Reid, on his guitar in his garden, early hours of the morning, birds in the background, leading worship. And it was like morning worship. I was like, I love this. Oh, this is great. Subscribed to his channel. It was very early days. I think he was maybe 2 videos in at that point. And next week, the next one come out. Next week, the next come out. And a few of them, I was just, I love how he just sings that particular old hymn or something. And I would send it to a friend. I go, this is great. I love this guy. Who is he? I could not, for the life of me, work out who this guy was. You start doing a little bit of searching online. I can't track him down. And eventually, I put on Facebook, does anybody know who Samuel Jackson Reid is? And I posted a video of him leading worship, and within minutes, it was fast. Pops up Samuel Jackson Reid, and he went hello, and literally, apparently, it turns out somebody who I'm friends with on Facebook knew his mum, messaged his mum messaged him, and he came on and went hello, and we made contact. And it was just wonderful to be able to interview him, bring him onto the podcast, interview him about worship, discipleship, and all that kind of stuff. And he is amazing. So I'm going to put some links to some of his worship in the show notes. But friends, let's just dive in, because it's such a lovely conversation with him. Conversation about worship and discipleship from the worship leader, Samuel Jackson Reid. Do check him out on YouTube. But he's somebody who's really blessed me with his worship leading. Samuel Jackson Reid, welcome to Making Disciples.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
I'm really excited about this episode because I don't know when it was. Was it 2 months ago on YouTube? I'm normally watching rap videos and what else do I watch? Lego videos and that kind of stuff. And this video pops up with this guy in his garden leading worship with the birds in the background, and I was like, I love this. So I stuck it on, played it while having breakfast. Following week there was another one. Then I ended up sharing them to my small group, and 2 months has gone by, and I was like, this I am loving this just intimate worship time in creation. And I was like, I need to find out who this guy is. So I put it on Facebook, and you responded within moments. So I'm really excited to meet you, because it feels like I want to ask you about your creative process and what made you do that. But just tell us a little bit about yourself before I jump in.
So I'm a poet and a singer-songwriter and a worship leader, and I also work full-time in human rights for a charity called CSW. And I'm based in Nottingham. Grew up in the south though, so I'm a southern softie for my sins. Grew up in kind of charismatic evangelical church, big old church down a town called Bracknell, which kind of made no sense, just a commuter town, but there was like 1,000 of us or something ridiculous like that, and a youth group that just exploded and was about 500 people I think at one point, and started leading worship from the age of 12, writing songs. I was in theatre, I was doing gigs, I played in thrash metal bands, I played in folk duos, did all sorts of stuff. And then went off to uni and studied politics, philosophy, religion, deconstructed my faith, reconstructed my faith, played in a Bruce Springsteen style kind of rock and roll band. We were called Sam Jackson and the Struggles, which the music is still out there somewhere if you're curious. I'm not going to tell you where, but if people want to listen.
That's what Google's for.
Yeah, exactly. It's not my best, not my favorite stuff, but it is there, and it was a fun time. yeah, and sort of through many different ways, found myself as a worship pastor full time for a period of time, and now kind of trying to walk the wild way of Jesus and kind of be obedient to what I feel like he's asked me to be, which is a songwriter, a poet, and a worship leader, and psalmist is probably the best word to describe what it is that I feel called to be.
Mm. The reality is, uh, YouTube is not. I'm sure you didn't wake up and go, "Oh, I want to get on YouTube. I've got to get on YouTube."
No, no, no,
But
no.
there's something about that communication device that is really incredibly toxic and incredibly beautiful all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
What made you go? Do you know what? I
Mm,
I think I just want to put something into the world that may be helpful for someone, and particularly something in the sense of really stripped back,
mm.
authentic. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
what was that process like?
yeah. So I think it's been if I think about it, honestly, it's been quite a long process. I think I've always tried, if you're an artist of any description, there's a reality of wrestling with the technology of the day and what the technology of the day is asking you to do, right? Like you can't just be, I mean, you absolutely can just be playing gigs in your local area and writing songs in your local area and doing all of that kind of stuff. But if you want to reach and connect with a larger group of people, you've got to work out how you can utilize those means of technology, because they can be really useful and really beautiful. So I'd say, tried 10 years worth of different things trying to figure out how do I be myself authentically on this. And to varying degrees of success, mostly not successful. But back in November, well, actually, this time last year, I had these worship songs. So I write non-worship stuff actually as my main thing, is kind of like indie Christian singer-songwriter, folky, whatever.
Mm.
And but I had these worship songs that I'd been playing at David's Tent, which is a worship festival. But also when I was a worship pastor, we played them in the church, and people would be like, I want to listen to them. And I didn't really want to spend any money on them.
Mm.
And so we actually decided to do what we called an iPhone EP. So we literally just put my iPhone in the middle of the living room, and my wife and I sang these songs through.
Mm.
And I put it out in November. It's called A Liturgy of the Hours, Volume 1. And the feedback we got was amazing. And a friend of mine who does kind of social media stuff and YouTube stuff was basically like, you should do this on YouTube. And I was like, no, I'm a serious singer-songwriter. Like the worship leading is just like it's a part of who I am. It's obviously something that I really care about, but no, like I want to be seen as this cool, edgy indie artist thing. He was like, mate, I think you really should think about it. And essentially through a number of different conversations, and actually God then speaking quite clearly
Mm.
that this was something that he wanted me to do. I started, and I originally was like, okay, I'll do one video a month. And my friend was like, no, I think you should do more. I was like, okay, I'll do two. He's like, no, I think you should do more. I was like, okay, I'll do three. He was like, no, I think you should do one a week. And I was like, one a week? Like, that's crazy. But as I got into the rhythm of it, I think I began to, there are weeks where I wake up on a Wednesday morning and it's, 5:45 in the morning and I need to get out and get the recording done. And I'm like, I would rather be doing anything else than getting out and doing this. But there are the majority of the time I'm
Mm.
like, wow, I get to be out in nature, praising the Lord in this kind of simple way. And so that was kind of the genesis, was really a friend of mine saying, I think this would really bless people. And he was like, I think you see it, Sam, as like separate to all the other work that you're doing,
Mm.
but I actually think it's a core part. And he was right. And I think it's kind of
Mm.
these two parts of my creative life that I have often felt were separate have actually begun to merge together. The way I've been describing it is there's this part of me that felt like David, you know, in the temple, in the tabernacle, leading the worship, that kind of the psalmist David. And then there's this part of me that felt like John the Baptist out in the wilderness, kind of make way for the coming of the Lord, and a bit more kind of out on the edge. And I never knew how those two things fit together. And as I've been doing this, realizing that it has. But I think the idea to do it so stripped back partly was a necessity. I had no budget. and I don't know how to do production. And so I was
Yeah.
like, what do I have in my hands? I have a simple camera that only records for 10 minutes at a time. So I have to like keep really, really on edge. It's like there's 10-minute slots, and then I have to kind of like keep an eye on the clock on the microphone and go, okay, I'm coming close. I probably need to like wrap up what I'm doing. I have to stop, go reset the camera, come back and carry on, and then edit it all together. The microphone I had, I was like, I don't want to be dragging around laptops and all of that kind of stuff. So it's called a Zoom H2N, and it's a field recording microphone, and it runs with AA batteries. So it's literally the most portable thing. I can pop it up anywhere.
Mm.
Um, and I think I was thinking about this morning. I think there was this part of me that's feeling a little tired of what I jokingly, and I mean I don't mean this harshly, but what I jokingly call the crash bang wallop aesthetic of worship sound and worship music.
Mm.
And I was just feeling a bit tired of that whole aesthetic, a bit worn out by it all. And I was finding in myself, though I, grew up in all of that and I know how to do it, and I, have, and I'm part of places that do that really well. I just wanted this, the way I was worshiping was much quieter,
Mm.
and actually introduced a lot more silence and kind of more poetic language or written prayers. But then on top of that, I was finding that being out in nature was a really important place for me to connect with God. And so it was kind of, can I draw these things together? And the kind of way I was thinking about this morning was so much of our lives feel like sliding your finger across a glass screen, right? Like, so everything is iPhone, right? It's textureless. And sometimes I feel like my worship experiences in the larger spaces were text. It's kind of just felt very kind of almost synthetic. And that's not to be down on anybody doing that, not at all. It's just the kind of sometimes the nature of the models or whatever that's going on. And I just wanted it to be full of texture. So you've got the bird song, you've got, the sound of the river running next to me, the wind coming through, sometimes cars in the background, sirens going off, helicopters overhead. Like there was this part of me that wanted to go, hey, look, you can actually worship in the middle of your ordinary life, and you don't have to remove all the distractions in order to worship. In fact, sometimes those distractions can texture the experience of the worship and actually lead you into a really interesting place with God. And I felt that for a long time before I was doing the worship, the YouTube, and I feel slightly vindicated that I was maybe my impulse was right, because of the way people have responded to it, going like, oh, I actually found it, it was really helpful in a weird way that siren went off in the middle of the set, and you didn't decide to cut that out, and actually that helped me to remind myself to pray for others and to pray for things going on in my city or in the world, or all these kind of thing. Or the bird song in particular seems to be a favorite kind of part of things. But I've always, dogs barking, neighbors chatting. I just had this sense of like you can you don't have to go to a special place necessarily. Special places are great, and thin spaces and pilgrimages and all that kind of stuff. That I'm all for that. But you can also worship in the middle of distractions and making mistakes. I fluff the lyrics up all the time, and I just go, oh, whatever, like you just
Yeah.
carry on. It doesn't matter.
So I minister on a housing estate in East London.
Mm.
And one of the things we've really struggled with is a lot of hymns or songs often talk about, on the forest glade I wander. And like my congregation are going, what? Where's a forest glade? I've never seen one of
Yeah.
those. No, you haven't.
Mm.
So I said to my worship pastor, let's write worship that comes from our housing estate. And he wrote a song called Flourish and Bloom. And it's all about the kingdom of God in the housing estate.
Mm.
And I have a book coming out next month, shameless plug. And I said, Ben, I want that song in the book because the song says something like what I've written about in the book.
Mm.
And we were like, we need to record it so when people get to that point in the book, they can zap the QR code and they can then listen to the song. Well, how do you do that? You start thinking about how you could record it. And I said, I'd really love it if we could just go into the middle of our estate, plug in a microphone and record you singing it with the dogs barking, the fire ambulances, fire engines and the ambulances going by, because then it's worship in the midst of a place, and place is so central. And it's one of the things I loved listening to your videos is that it is the birds, creation is crying out,
I also loved it when you did one where you were in your kitchen.
Yeah.
And what was fun about it was, I think there was a mug or something on the draining board.
Mm,
Wasn't
mhm, mhm.
tidy. You'd not gone around. Oh, I need to tidy this up. I'm recording
Yeah.
for. You actually left it as it was, and even visually, there's something there about worship in the midst of everyday chaotic just life.
Yeah.
So the birds are doing something, but also visually there was something that I just thought that for me, that would never be. You would never do that with Hillsong. You'd never do that with Bethel. You'd never do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It would be
Yeah.
very.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's that authenticness that
Mm,
has just been really appealing.
mm.
Um, have you had much response?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been crazy. To be honest, I thought I committed to doing them for a year. As I'll make 52 videos, um, and maybe towards the end of that year, it will feel worth continuing. I think I was fully anticipating that it would be very, very small, very, very niche, and as I talk now, it's like 45,000 people
Mm,
are subscribed and watching every single week. And it's reaching millions of people in terms of kind of how YouTube is pushing it out. And the comments that I get, or
mm,
people kind of finding their way, I write a Substack where I kind of write longer form stuff, where I publish my poetry. I have my original music. People are finding their way into those kind of slightly more direct communication spaces with me and telling me all sorts of stuff. I had one video which was kind of I work in human rights, and I think it was just as the Iran war stuff was all kicking off a few months ago, and it had been such a heavy week, and I was like, I have to sing into this. I can't just do a happy, clappy,
mm,
joyful, which isn't always my disposition anyway. But I was like, I need to sing some songs that help me come face to face with this reality. And there's a
mm,
song by a guy called Andy Squires called "You Bring the Morning," and there's the lines in it are pretty phenomenal. But the comments that I was getting on that post, there were people from Ukraine, there were people from Iran, there were people from all over the world who are going through
mm,
what it was that I had been witnessing and working on in the week, actually then responding and saying, thank you, this was really helpful, and this brought me hope. And hope is a big theme for me. I think hope, space to kind of reflect on hope and feel a sense of hope, not in this kind of um, triumphant hope. I think for me, hope is much subtler. The kind of the way I've been understanding it in recent years has been this idea of like despair is actually quite a sweet poison, and it's easy. You can drink it and it goes down quite easy, because if you despair about the world, it's just confirming everything that you already thought was true, right? Like,
mm,
the world is terrible. Everyone's out to get me. There's no redemption for any of this. But hope is almost like a more bitter draft. And at first, it's a little harder to swallow because it feels like you're having to deny what you're seeing in front of you. But it's actually, no, it's to look beyond what you're seeing in front of you and move towards that. So hope with a bit of grit in it, hope with a
mm,
bit of salt, and an earthiness to it. And so, yeah, so that response has been, that's kind of what I long for. You get loads of people who are just like the songs, right? And that's good. I'm glad that that's
mm,
working. I'm not that interested in the songs, in worship songs, as much as I am in creating kind of a space for people. The songs are a means to an end, really, and they are when you're in church on a Sunday
mm,
morning. It's a means to an end. Um, I think God delights in our singing. I think He really enjoys it. I think that's why there's something unique about it. But on the whole, there means to an end. And so for me, that end is like, are you able to find a place to abide with God, to wrestle with God, to lament with God, to do something with Him, um,
mm,
in the middle of what is actually happening in your life, rather than seeing it as like, oh, if I sing goodness of God, maybe I'll escape my life. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, sing into your life rather than trying to use singing to escape from it. So yeah, when that's the response, and that has been the response in many, 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 many cases, that's been the reality. People struggling with their kids, people with with neurological conditions that mean they can't access church. Non-Christians, people who just go, I really like the vibe. Like there's all sorts of stuff. People who are really tired. I think that's another
Mm.
thing for me. People who are a bit worn out on faith, a bit worn out on church, finding, I would want people to ultimately find a community that they can belong to. And I don't think that's what, I believe in person to person, flesh and blood, brick and mortar stuff. But if this is the beginning of a conversation for people who are a bit worn out on stuff to get you back into some sort of community, that's my story, and that's what I hope it continues to be my story. Um, that kind of trying to get back into the flesh and blood thing from a bit of a place of like, man, I'm worn out on all of this. Um, trying, wanting to believe that there's something good and true and beautiful actually, there's wanting to believe that there's something beautiful about the church and that I can access it.
Mm.
um that's a little bit, I think, of what I'm trying to do as well. Yeah, so yeah, the response has been out kind of beyond what I expected by a long way.
There was, you see, I have actually had them on. Um, there was one where you said, oh, I'm just tired. I
Mm,
don't really want to be here, Lord, but
yeah.
I know it's good.
Mm,
And I must have been watching, I had it on in the background a few days after it had gone out, and I'm in the kitchen, I'm doing emails. I was exhausted, and
mm.
I was like, that's the first time a worship leader in any time of worship stood there and said, I'm not sure I want to be doing this,
Yeah,
but I know it's good,
yeah,
and so I will.
yeah.
And I was like, thank you, somebody who's being honest. I mean, I'm a church leader, so every Sunday I'm in church at 8 a.m. getting ready,
Mm,
and there are many Sundays where you're like, Lord, I don't want to be here. I would
yeah,
much rather be at home in bed right now,
yeah.
but I'm here because yes, I'm here to serve my family, but
Hmm.
I'm here because I know this is a good thing,
Yeah,
and um, you know, leaning in, even when
yeah,
you feel like your body wants to lean out.
yeah.
So that really got me theologically thinking about worship in
Mm,
terms of that whole posture thing of what does, I mean, you've just kind of touched on it. Does worship bring me into the Lord, or does worship take me out of myself?
yeah.
And the danger with saying, actually, I enjoy worship. I have this incredible experience, almost like the whirling dervishes. They
Yeah,
spin themselves into frenzy.
yeah,
It
yeah.
takes them out of their heads. Well,
Mm,
actually, worship should never take us out of the world.
mm,
It kind of helps us lean into God's presence in the midst of,
mm.
which has an interesting link then with, talking about justice. And I'd love to just hear some thoughts that you have, that interplay between worship and justice.
Yeah,
Romans talks about it, doesn't he? Living
yeah,
sacrifice, living lives.
yeah,
Micah 6:8, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly.
yeah.
Worship is always meant to be an interplay between, yes, music, yes, liturgies,
Mm,
psalms, but also how we live.
yeah,
And have you got any thoughts on how those
yeah,
things come together?
yeah. One of the most, if there's any worship leaders listening, I would encourage them to go and read Amos. In particular, a particular line that everyone loves quoting, a particular verse that everyone loves quoting the second half of. So it's like, let justice flow like a river, mercy like an ever-flowing stream. Just before that is away with the noise of your songs.
Yeah.
I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll like a stream. Uh, and Isaiah 58, is this not the fasting I have chosen to loose the bonds of oppression, to break off every yoke? There is such a thread and a clear command that we, as people who are following Jesus, should embody what it is that
Mm.
we believe in a way that actively helps the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed, those who are suffering injustice. So my wife works with refugees and asylum seekers. I work in with freedom of religion or belief. But she grew up in South America as a missionary kid, and so has grown up in and around so much of this, done a lot of thinking. And my dad was the director of social justice at our church, and so kind of both of us have grown up with this kind of this part of this understanding. And the phrase and the language that we have is worship and justice are partners in the same dance.
Oh.
Because I think if you do two sides of the same coin, you can just choose to look at one side of the coin or the other and prefer one side of the coin or the other. But if it's a dance and it's in motion, then
Yeah.
both are required to have the dance be
Mm.
effective and actually to have it be beautiful. If one of you is trying to take over too much and be dominating it too much, the dance won't work. And so you have to submit to one another. And the way that that sort of looks like for me is if you focus too much on
Mm.
worship, it can become about that escape. Sometimes it can become a bit navel gazing. It can become a bit self-indulgent. Um, and actually it can become just noise, and it becomes kind of a bit shallow ultimately after a while if you're not careful.
Mm.
um, if you focus solely on the justice, my experience and what I've seen, you can get very angry and bitter and
Mm.
vengeful, and actually you begin to see the kind of fulfillment of justice as your responsibility rather than God's. And so the idea is that if you know wherever you are on that spectrum, it's like you need to make sure you're regularly moving in and out of those other things. Um, and so I think that that's a really, really core idea for me is that the sometimes in worship circles we talk about horizontal worship and vertical worship. So this idea of you have some songs which are just kind of like straight up, I'm just praising you, God. It's like me and God connecting thing. And then there's the kind of like horizontal, which is like going out or
Mm.
like it's us as a collective. And I think it's helpful to separate those things to get a sense of what they are. But I actually think they're the same when it comes to God. They're actually the same movement. So to praise Him is to then also go and embody that and be doing works of justice, works of shalom is the word in the Bible,
Yeah.
wholeness. So go and be part of the bringing of the kingdom of God. And I as the older I get, the more I feel like it's kind of a non-negotiable.
Mm.
The more I'm kind of like, guys, it's actually like this isn't just an optional extra for people who feel particularly compassionate. You know, it's like there is something very, very clear about Jesus saying, "You will find me in the eyes of the poor.
Mm.
You will find me like standing side by side with those who are oppressed and are finding injustice. That's where you will find me. So if you seek me, you need to go like if that's what you want, if you want the
Yeah.
presence of God, you need to learn how to love
Yeah.
those who are deemed unlovable a lot of the time. And that's really hard. I'm not, it's not easy.
Mm.
But I think your worship, for it to be really, really, truly beautiful, um, I think it should flow out into some sort of embodied action of um, serving your community, serving those
Mm.
on the outside. It cannot just become about how loud we can be and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, for me, they dance together.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you could switch worship with beauty. I think beauty is really important. I think that's one of the goals of singing and worship is to make something is to make it beautiful, as well. Uh, because it's not always about singing, right? But yeah, that's kind of a core dynamic for my life, is this movement between the two of those things.
Amazing. We're going to run out of time pretty fast. I'd
Sure.
love to talk to you about poetry.
Yeah.
And you can already see in your language the poetic use
Mm,
of words. And you
mm,
aren't somebody who, I mean, I've got a very small vocabulary, um, being a Yorkshireman. The way you see things and the way you articulate things,
mm,
there's a poetry to it.
mm.
Where does all of that come from for you? Where did you start?
Yeah, what a good question. Uh, my mum was an English teacher,
Helps.
and my dad loved to read and loves to read. He's still with us. But we talked. My dad went from being a lawyer when I was quite young to then working for Christians Against Poverty,
Hmm?
and so we went from being kind of like upper middle class salary to
Yeah.
sort of like, but my parents, gave us a cultural education. Like they loved literature and they loved this. So I think we were kind of surrounded by stuff anyway, and
Mm.
surrounded by story and surrounded by language kind of growing up. We read, remember my dad reading The Hobbit to us and just being obsessed with with good stories. And so I think I've always loved language. I've always loved songs. So like well-written songs, and the lyric has always been the important part to me. I've realized, and I did musical theatre, so I think there's also this degree of like the language and the music interplaying together. But just like anybody else, I think, you study poetry at school and it just gets robbed of all of its beauty and its power because you're just kind of pulling it apart to try and get at the sense so that you can get a good grade. But it was a few years ago, and this guy's he's kind of having a big moment in the sun now. But a friend of mine introduced me to Malcolm Geit. I don't know if you've come across Malcolm.
He is a
Um,
hobbit.
he is, yeah,
He,
and
his pipe is incredible.
he's absolutely marvelous. But I think listening to him, engaging with him, I watched a lecture that he gave where he talked about how he did he did a poem for every single psalm, where the end of one poem was the first line of the next. And so the whole book essentially is a
Oh,
crown.
yeah.
It kind of circles back around itself. And in that listening to that, I think he just awoke this kind of latent love of poetry. And I realized that whenever I've been writing lyrics, I'd essentially been writing poetry. So this is about 5 or 6 years ago now when I first kind of entered into that. And I think you just noticed it. I think there was something in how I just spoke, how I speak, how I see, that was just engaging with the poetic imagination already. I'm very right brain rather than left brain. Like I'm kind of type B. I'm not very good at 1 + 1 = 2 kind of stuff. I see things metaphorically, symbolically, and so poetry just kind of speaks to me in that sort of way. And so I think 6 years ago I just started to re-engage and re-explore
Mm.
um, kind of the heritage that we have in this country. I was thinking about there's that line, Margaret Thatcher being like, we're a nation of, what did she say? We're a nation of shopkeepers.
Mm.
And there's this part of me, and I think Malcolm says this as well, like, well, we're a nation of poets. We're a nation of artists. We're a nation of writers. We're a nation of makers and crafters
Craftsman, yeah.
and all this kind of stuff. And so I think I just became awake to this sense of being part of a larger tradition, and that it was something that was already happening within me, but I would never have given myself that title of poet. And then in the last few years, as I've been writing more and finding that actually the lyric is always where I start when I write a song. The thing that gripes me the most when it comes to worship music even is like, is the lyric, like, what's the lyric here? Could we be more, is there another way of saying this? Is there a way of witnessing to that truth in a more beautiful way? But also the kind of the depth of poetry is that it encourages you to come back and read again and again and again and again and again. And actually, so much of the Bible is poetry that it's kind of like, if you can understand poetry or understand what poetry can kind of produce in you, so much of the Bible kind of opens itself up to you, I think, because you kind of go like, oh, he's not, it's not being
Yeah.
literally that. Like, there's something deeper going on here. And I think Seamus Heaney said something about like, when you first read a poem, don't worry too much about trying to make sense of it. Just listen for the words that speak to your soul. And so I think for me, poetry is soul stuff. And that's kind of what I'm interested in. I find is I'm
Love that,
interested in
yeah.
what goes on in people's souls and how can you wake somebody up to the fact that they have a soul? Because a lot of our life
Yeah.
kind of is without that. So yeah, it's I'm kind of still on the journey of it. But it was this kind of realization of, oh, this has always sort of been in me and around me, and I've always loved this. But I didn't realize it. And then yeah, I'm still learning a lot, I
Yeah.
think, in that space. But yeah.
Love it. Well, I'm going to ask you in a minute where people can find some of your
Yeah.
stuff. I think I just want to honor you. So, as someone who, I know we don't know each other, but as somebody who um, I interview a lot of people, spend a lot of time with church leaders, often just pull people in who are interesting. It's very rare I pull somebody in that's really moved me.
Hmm.
And I think, we are about to transition to Birmingham. We've been here 16 years on this estate. Absolutely
Wow.
love it here. Served and grown something that's really trying to change the neighbourhood. And with all of that, there's the grief of moving on, there's the tiredness of ministry, and to find something that has really spoken to me and fed me. Now, I'm an evangelical, I love the word, so scripture is for me like the. But there's just been something about what you've put out that has just. I remember that the particular episode where you sang "Wake Up My Soul." It was what I needed.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you, because it's so lovely to find something that at the time I thought nobody else has found this. It's like treasure. And I'm going to keep this to myself because it's so brilliant. But then as I've shared it with my small group and shared it with my mates at Spring Harvest, I'm like, no, this is beautiful. It's just so authentic, and it's really been something I've loved, having you on loop while I'm writing. So, I have really loved it, and I'm really grateful that your friend said to you, no, I think you should do 4 a month. Because it's lovely to find something that really moves you and connects with you. And it's got nothing to do with anything that you're involved with. It's got nothing to do with. And the big stage worship's lovely, but it's not where I'm at. And it's not where I've been. And for a long time, there's something about finding God in the everyday. It's really what is sustainable in me. So massive thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing what else you end up doing, because there's something wonderful, and I love how you just talked about wake up the soul. There's something about the things that you're doing that is soul waking. So thank you. Where can people find your poetry, your music, your original music?
Well, truly, thank you. That's very kind, and I receive that gladly. That really encourages me. So thank you. I'm glad that it's moving you. So YouTube is Samuel Jackson Reid Music. Not to be confused with Sam Reid Music. He's also doing a similar thing, which is just hilarious that there's 2 of us with a similar name. He's been doing it longer than I have, to be fair to him. So that's kind of the way the worship stuff is. And then on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, Samuel Jackson Reid. You'll find my kind of more original music. There's a EP of songs called Valley Floor, which is all about finding God in the ordinary, from a couple years, from 2024. There's the iPhone EP, and then a single called The Hush, which came out this year. And I'm about to go and work on an album in the next couple of weeks, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be great. And then on Substack is where I kind of put the poetry, and it's a bit of a newsletter. And every month I do what I call a liturgy of the hours, which there's a whole story there, which we don't have time to get into. But it's essentially a longer form kind of essay or something about what I've been thinking about. So I've talked about lament, I've talked about kind of finding beauty in the everyday, all of that kind of stuff. So that's a really good place to kind of keep up to date with kind of what I'm thinking about. And then the kind of socials, Sam Jackson Reid Music on Instagram. That's probably where I'm the most active. If you're in Bristol in the next couple of people are in Bristol in the next couple of weeks, I have a live show happening at Woody's Church in Bristol, and then I'm also playing in Southampton. There'll be more gigs coming up this year as well, so I'd love to see people there. And then I'm at David's Tent this year, so there's a number of different places that I'm at. If people want to come and say hello, I'd love to meet people. That I'm really interested in actually connecting with people rather than just being a face on people's screens. So it'd be really good to say hello.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Mate, my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Grace and peace.